when the 13 colonies were forced to smash ships and dump tea. Who could have imagined this would overturn the rule of the British Empire? In the 17th century, with the establishment of multiple settlements, the Spaniards eventually settled on the Florida Peninsula and began exploring the southwestern part of North America. The French expanded their influence from the north to the south, incorporating large areas of what is now central United States into the territory of New France. Meanwhile, the British successfully consolidated control over the eastern coastal region of what is now the United States and established the famous 13 colonies there. These 13 colonies were later divided into three regions: New England colonies, Middle Colonies, and Southern Colonies. As overseas possessions of Britain, these colonies were governed by the British government but all had certain autonomy, and white men were allowed to participate in elections. However, in some areas, Jews and Catholics were excluded. Although Britain restricted these colonies from trading with other European powers, the British colonies in North America still found profitable trading partners among other British colonies. During the establishment of colonies in North America by European powers, large numbers of black slaves were transported to North America through the transatlantic slave trade. The Southern Colonies, benefiting from favorable climate and fertile soil, were agriculture-based and developed a prosperous plantation economy. This economic model relied on a single crop plantation system, supported by large plantations and enslaved labor, to export agricultural products. Major cash crops of the time included tobacco, rice, and cotton. These crops were exported in exchange for imported goods. Because of this, the scale of slavery in the Southern Colonies far exceeded that of the other British North American colonies. The Middle Colonies were characterized by great diversity in religion, ethnicity, and economy. The fertile soil made the region an important exporter of grains such as wheat. At the same time, thanks to abundant forest resources, the lumber industry and shipbuilding industry flourished. Textile and steel industries in Pennsylvania also achieved notable development. With the rise of these industries and the deep estuaries and river systems, major port cities like New York and Philadelphia emerged. New England colonies, due to their rocky terrain and soil far less fertile than the Southern and Middle Colonies, had limited agricultural development but possessed rich natural resources, including valuable timber. Residents in the New England region lived mainly in fishing villages and agricultural communities, mostly as small farmers, living relatively self-sufficient lives. Over time, the region's economy gradually shifted toward handicrafts and trade. People only traded for goods they could not produce themselves. In addition, New England was located in an area rich in marine biological resources, and thus became an important commercial and shipbuilding center. It became not only a hub for trade between Europe and the Southern Colonies but also integrated into Britain's global trade network. New England also developed the triangular trade system, first obtaining molasses from the West Indies, processing it into rum, then using rum to exchange for slaves in Africa, and finally selling the slaves to the West Indies and the Southern Colonies. In the early 18th century, slavery replaced indentured servitude as the main source of agricultural labor in the crop plantations of the Southern Colonies. Although slavery was legal in all 13 British colonies, colonial society remained divided over its religious and moral implications. Due to high population birth rates, low death rates, and stable settlements, the population of the North American colonies grew rapidly. In the 1740s, a religious movement called the First Great Awakening emerged. This movement not only enhanced the religious atmosphere of the colonies but also ignited people's pursuit of religious freedom. Also in the 1740s, British colonies led by the Virginia colony began competing to purchase land from Native Americans, because the British Crown insisted that land must be obtained through legal purchase. In 1754, the French and Indian War broke out. The two sides were the North American colonies under the British Empire and the colonies under the French Crown, both supported by various Native American tribes. 2 years after the war began, Britain formally declared war on France, and the 7 Years' War began. In 1762, Spain joined the war by allying with France to invade Portugal, a British ally. However, this alliance ultimately failed. Spain ceded Havana to Britain. The following year, under the Treaty of Paris, Spain exchanged the return of Havana for ceding Florida to Britain. Also in the Treaty of Paris, France ceded its colonies in present-day Canada to Britain. Britain then established the province of Quebec, which covered large areas of what is now the United States. France also ceded the areas east of the Mississippi River and westward to the mountains to Britain, while the areas west of the Mississippi River were ceded to Spain based on the secret Treaty of Fontainebleau signed the previous year. However, the war placed a heavy financial burden on the British Empire. To cover the cost of maintaining troops in the North American colonies, Britain imposed a series of taxes, including the Sugar Act of 1764, which prohibited the import of rum and imposed tariffs on all non-West Indies sugar imports, and the Stamp Act of 1765, requiring a stamp tax on commercial documents, newspapers, books, etc. Colonists strongly opposed these taxes and launched multiple protests, ultimately forcing Britain to repeal the Stamp Act. But in 1767, Britain passed the Townshend Acts, imposing more taxes, again provoking colonial dissatisfaction. The unrest in the province of Massachusetts Bay was particularly severe. In 1769, Spain launched the Portola expedition, led by Gaspar de Portola, departing from Baja California. This was the first overland expedition by Europeans to reach present-day California, marking the beginning of Spanish colonization of the region. That same year, the city of San Diego was founded. To calm the turmoil in Massachusetts Bay, Britain deployed troops there, which eventually led to the Boston Massacre in 1770. After the massacre, Britain repealed most taxes but kept the tax on tea to symbolically preserve Parliament's right to tax the colonies. In 1773, seeking to help the financially troubled British East India Company, Parliament passed the Tea Act, granting the company monopoly rights on tea trade in the colonies. This act triggered the Boston Tea Party, during which protesters dumped tea from 3 British East India Company ships into the sea. This incident sharply escalated tensions between the British colonies and the Crown. Britain retaliated by closing Boston Harbor and enacting the Intolerable Acts, which abolished part of Massachusetts Bay's autonomy. In 1774, all colonies except Georgia sent representatives to Philadelphia to form the First Continental Congress, aiming to coordinate colonial resistance against the Crown. Those who opposed Britain were called Patriots, while those who remained loyal to the Crown were Loyalists. The First Continental Congress passed the Continental Association, agreeing to jointly boycott British goods through non-importation, non-consumption, and non-exportation to demand repeal of the Intolerable Acts. In response, Parliament declared Massachusetts Bay to be in a state of rebellion and passed the Restraining Acts, restricting trade between the colonies and the British West Indies and forbidding New England ships from fishing in Newfoundland. Tensions escalated, ultimately leading to a struggle over control of military supply depots. On April 19, 1775, British troops were sent to Concord to destroy munitions and arrest Patriot leaders. This led to the battles of Lexington and Concord, marking the official outbreak of the American Revolutionary War. In June of the same year, the Second Continental Congress reorganized Patriot militias into the Continental Army and appointed George Washington as commander-in-chief. In 1776, statesman Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence. Based on Enlightenment and liberal ideas, its full name was the Unanimous Declaration of the 13 United States of America. A 5-member committee drafted it: Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, John Adams of Massachusetts, Benjamin Franklin of Pennsylvania, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, and Robert Livingston of New York. The declaration was approved at the Second Continental Congress in Philadelphia, formally proclaiming the 13 colonies as sovereign and independent states. no longer under British rule, and officially legitimizing the American Revolution. Meanwhile, in the western part of North America, the Portola expedition reached the San Francisco Bay, leading to the establishment of the city of San Francisco. The next year, representatives of 28 towns gathered and declared independence from British colonial rule, establishing a new government. During the war, the Continental Army and British forces fought multiple battles. In October 1777, during the Battle of Saratoga, the Colonial Army achieved its first major victory against the British. This victory greatly encouraged France and Spain, prompting both countries to ally with the American revolutionaries. This alliance balanced the naval and military power between America and Britain, making Saratoga one of the most crucial victories for American independence. From 1778 onward, the war shifted focus to the Southern Colonies. Initially, the British won several key victories, such as the Siege of Charleston in 1780, one of the worst defeats for the Patriots. In 1781, 44 colonial residents and 4 Spanish soldiers founded the town of Los Angeles on the west coast of North America, which later became modern-day Los Angeles. That same year, after a series of victories in the South, the Patriots controlled most of the Carolinas and Georgia. They then defeated the British in the Battle of Chesapeake, September 5th, and the Siege of Yorktown, October 19th. After 12 hours of negotiation, the British formally surrendered. In 1783, Britain and the United States signed the Treaty of Paris, officially ending the American Revolutionary War. Britain relinquished control of the Ohio River Valley and recognized the Mississippi River as the western boundary of the United States. Florida was returned to Spain. The 31 degrees north latitude line was established as the southern boundary of U.S. territory. In 1787, the Ohio River Valley became the Northwest Territory. In 1789, the Spanish established the Santa Cruz de Nootka outpost on Nootka Sound on the present-day Canadian west coast, claiming large areas of the Pacific Northwest. Spain seized several British merchant ships there, triggering the Nootka Crisis. Also in 1789, the U.S. Constitution was officially adopted. American Revolutionary War hero George Washington became the first president. The next year, Congress passed the Residence Act to establish a national capital, with its location chosen by the president. Thus, Washington, D.C. was founded along the Potomac River on land donated by Virginia and Maryland. In 1790, to resolve the Nootka Crisis, the relevant parties signed the Nootka Conventions, agreeing that the region would be jointly administered by Spain and Britain. Also in 1790, land west of North Carolina was ceded to the federal government and became the Southwest Territory. The Second Great Awakening, a Protestant revival movement, also began in 1790, spreading religious belief and prompting various social reforms. In 1791, Vermont joined the Union as the 14th state. The next year, Kentucky was separated from Virginia and became the 15th state. In 1794, the Third Nootka Convention was signed, with Spain and Britain agreeing to abandon control of the Nootka region. The next year, both nations withdrew. In 1796, a portion of the Southwest Territory was carved out to establish Tennessee, making it the 16th state. In 1798, a disputed land area within Georgia that had been fought over by the United States and Spain became the Mississippi Territory. On November 17, 1800, during the presidency of John Adams, the U.S. Congress held its first session in Washington, D.C., making the city the official capital of the United States. This is how the United States came into being. The American Revolution opened the path for the development of capitalism in North America. But issues such as slavery brought long-term challenges for the new nation's future. This history shows us that every historical process unfolds within its specific era. In the next episode, we will learn about America's westward expansion and the crucial event in U.S. history, the American